So Carol, I know that people are going to continue to come in. Thank you so much for continuing to admit folks. I think we will start ahead because we do have a limited amount of time tonight. We want to honor people's schedules. So I want to say, good evening and welcome. For those of you I don't personally know yet, I am Erica Baruch, the Jewish Disabilities Advocates Advisor at Jewish Family Service of Colorado. And all of us at JFS are very glad each of you are here, as together we seek to raise awareness around chronic health conditions and their impacts on individuals and families. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Linda Foster, Jewish Family Service President and CEO, and thank her for all her support for Jewish disabilities advocates and the work we do. Linda.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us to kick off Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. JFS really values our partnership with all of you, and I want to thank Erica and Carol Morris and Roxanne Miller-Frutel for their leadership of our Jewish Disability Advocates program. And again, thank you for your partnership and welcome tonight.
Thank you so much, Linda. I also want to sincerely thank Roxanne Miller-Frutel, who's the JFS Director of Disability Services, and Carol Morris, JFS Jewish Disabilities Advocates Coordinator, who helped put this program together and will be assisting with the technology this evening. Additionally, thanks to the marketing team at JFS, who aided us in producing materials for Jewish Disabilities Awareness and Inclusion Month, or JDAIM, and Topher Brewer, who is providing American Sign Language interpretation. Captioning is also enabled tonight. If you would like captioning, please go to the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to Carol in the chat. Finally, I cannot express enough gratitude for the Jewish Disabilities Advocates partner organizations, B'nai Havara, Bonei Shalom, Har Hashem, Hillel of Colorado, Judaism Your Way, and Rodef Shalom. Each of these organizations has been hard at work to raise awareness and further inclusion for those with a broad range of disabilities. This year for JDAIM, we collectively decided to focus on chronic health conditions for several reasons. First, chronic health conditions, defined as conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical care or limit activities of daily life or both, impact a large percentage of the population. In fact, according to the Center for Disease Control, 6 in 10 adults have a chronic health condition, and 4 in 10 have 2 or more. Further, over 40% of school-aged children and adolescents have at least one chronic condition. Some chronic conditions are prevalent and well known, while others are quite rare. Just a few examples include allergies and food intolerances, arthritis, cancer, cystic fibrosis, diabetes, digestive disorders such as celiac, colitis, and irritable bowel syndrome, mental illness, migraines, heart disease and stroke, lupus, Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, and many more.
Yeah, I'm gone.
If you could put yourselves on mute, that would be great. Of course, now this list includes long COVID. Further, while there are sometimes visible aspects of chronic conditions, such as a diabetes pump or muscle weaknesses, 96% of chronic conditions are invisible, and they may carry invisible elements. The JDA partners realize the importance of raising awareness about these often invisible conditions, especially because having good support and strong social networks is key. The link now being shared in the chat includes our new chronic health conditions video featuring 2 stories from our community and an accompanying handout that offers suggestions for supporting those with chronic health conditions. The link also contains information about the wonderful upcoming JDAIM programs focused on chronic health conditions at each of our JDA partner organizations and other organizations in the community. If you would like more information about JDAIM activities or Jewish disabilities advocates, please reach out to either myself or Carol. Our emails are also being posted in the chat, and we will again post all of this information at the end of the session as well. Before we introduce our speaker, I just want to run through a few technical logistics. If everyone could stay on mute, that would really help us encourage our attention on the presenter. And then following the presentation, we will have a question and answer period, and you can one at a time unmute then. Please also feel free to post questions or comments in the chat, and we can address those during the Q&A. You can share your question with the whole group or send it directly to me if you prefer. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our talented, thoughtful, and resilient speaker, Maggie Whittam. Maggie came to us via the suggestion of fellow stroke survivor and B'nai Havara member, Quetzal Bradley, and we were grateful to make the connection. Maggie has much to share about chronic health conditions and their impact on individuals, as well as how organizations and communities can become more supportive and inclusive places for those with a variety of visible and invisible challenges. Maggie, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. So I am going to share my screen with you all. Just give me one sec. Okay. Here we go. So my name is Maggie Whittam, and I survived a stroke when I was 33 years old, and it has left me with numerous chronic conditions. And so when Carol and Erica approached me to be the speaker for Jewish Disabilities Awareness and Inclusion Month, which begins today, February 1st, I was really thrilled. So thank you so much for having me today. I'd love to start today with a quote by the writer Susan Sontag. Oh, sorry. I thought I had my phone on Do Not Disturb. Oh, geez. Poor form. Okay. Now it's on Do Not Disturb. Okay. Okay. So this quote by Susan Sontag, the writer, she wrote this back in the 70s from her novel Illness as Metaphor. Everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick. Although we all prefer to use the good passport, sooner or later each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of that other place. I love this quote because it's very realistic that we don't all get to be 100% healthy in our lives. And also I would add that people with chronic conditions live in an in-between place between these two kingdoms. So I'd love to start with the story of how I became chronically ill. I was born in 1981 in Steamboat Springs, which is about 3 hours northwest of Denver. It's a little mountain town. As a child, I loved to jump on my trampoline and ride my horse and play in the snow in the winter. And I loved the performing arts from a young age. As an adult, some words I would have used to describe myself would have been bold. I took a lot of risks in my life and went on a lot of adventures. I really love to have fun and take a wacky picture and enjoy the lighter side of life. And I was very blessed with this incredible body that had great agility and balance and would do whatever I wanted it to. As a profession, I was an actor and a freelance director and producer. And as such, I often had several other jobs and would often put in an 80-hour week with no complaints. And I really loved the high energy, kind of hectic lifestyle. I was also a leader of other people. I ran an improv comedy troupe for a long time and directed and produced numerous plays and musicals. I was also a talented athlete, and I could pick up sports easily. By Western beauty standards, I was kind of the feminine ideal. I was, a tall, pretty, skinny white woman with long legs, great body, very symmetrical face, blonde hair, blue eyes, great smile. I was a traveler. I loved to travel and had done a lot of traveling on my own throughout Asia and North America and a bit in South America. And growing up in Colorado, I was very outdoorsy and loved to hike and camp. So you can see how my body used to move. This is a video from 2012. This is a dance theater project to some William Blake poetry.
And I wept both night and day, and he wiped my tears away. And I wept both day and night, and hid from him my heart's delight.
So I live in the kingdom of the well. I'm very lucky. I'm in graduate school. These are me and my classmates outside the Lincoln Memorial. I was going to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And I had been dating this guy for several years, and we had gotten engaged. And we sent out 150 save the date cards to a wedding, which would not end up happening because we were not going to survive what was about to hit us. You saw that I like to take a wacky picture. So this was my wacky picture for my Christmas card in 2014. I was very fit after my first semester in graduate school, and I could do a handstand. And so I wanted to show everyone that I could do a handstand. So who I thought I was someone who helped other people and never needed help myself. I'm going to project this idea into the world that I am competent and ambitious, efficient, self-assured. I'm super independent. I can do anything if I just put my mind to it, work hard. And I feel like I have my life plan set. I'm gonna go to school, graduate, have my career. I'm gonna marry this guy. We're gonna have some kids. And I feel like I have it all figured out in terms of how it's gonna go. And out of the blue, I get struck by a stroke and the resulting chronic illnesses from the stroke. So my stroke was caused by cavernous angioma, which is a blood vessel malformation in the brain. 1 in 500 people has a cavernoma, and you may never know it in your lifetime because only 30% of these are symptomatic in a person's lifetime. And they can cause very minor symptoms like tingling and numbness. They can cause bigger symptoms like seizures, and they can cause massive symptoms like stroke. And so I was first finding out that I had a cavernous angioma in my brain when I'm having a full-on stroke. So it started the first Sunday into Christmas break from my graduate program, and I had a bad headache. By 48 hours after that, I was having balance problems, and I checked myself into George Washington Hospital. And by 48 hours after that, I was on life support and needing emergency brain surgery. So what is it like to have a stroke? I'm constantly thinking of analogies. And I think a tsunami is a good analogy. This is a picture of the tsunami that hit Japan in 2011. So it's like a giant tidal wave that is coming at you. It's this huge thing, and there's no hiding from it. There's no stopping it. And there's no inch of your life that is not going to affect. I spent 16 days in intensive care, 12 of those on a ventilator, 10 more days in acute care, which is the step down from intensive care, and then 5 weeks in a rehabilitation hospital. So I love to find pop culture references for what it's like to have a stroke, and I think this is very apt. This is picture from the movie Terminator 2, and the Terminator has been blown apart and he's made of metal, so he's all over the place, and he's very slowly going to come back together into human form. So this is what it feels like after a stroke. And here I am at the rehabilitation hospital.
Okay, hello everybody, it's January 25th, and here's where we're at with my leg.
Nice.
And with my arm.
It takes all the strength I have to open my hand like that.
Very cool.
There we go.
Awesome.
I have to learn how to walk again. I have a brace on my leg and a sling on my arm and a quad cane to use and a wheelchair behind me because at any moment I feel completely exhausted and need to sit down. By 6 months later, I'm walking better. I use a single point cane now, but I don't walk the way I used to. And at this point in time, I have entered the chronic phase of stroke. So how I felt psychologically, I just felt blown apart as a person. And as an actor, I had these headshots, which were a picture of myself that I took to auditions. And I had a giant pile of them, which were now useless. And so I started to destroy them and reassemble them different ways in order to try and explain to people, my family, my medical team, my coworkers, anybody, about what it feels like to have a stroke and how you just feel so different. And so you have this photo that's a beautiful photo, and it's a piece of paper. So if you change it in any way, you can't put it back to what it was before. And I think this is emblematic of my mindset at the time. I had my stroke 7 years ago, and I created these in the first 2 years. I would say I'm not under quite so much emotional distress anymore. But I do have many chronic conditions. One of them is double vision. So my vision is quote unquote fixed as much as it can be fixed, but I still have a lot of issues. So this is what the stairway looks like in my apartment building. This is why I do not drive, have no desire to drive. This is my sister and her friend. There's also how I feel in my body, right? My body looks approximately the same as it used to, but it behaves and feels very differently. And so I'm trying to explain to people, especially my doctors, what it feels like to live in my body now. So I take some Barbie dolls and I try to make them look like I feel. So this one is one with gray clay to simulate concrete, which is the numbness and heaviness that I feel in my left side. And this continues to this day, this feeling. I also have terrible nerve pain in the left side of my body. And so I took rubber bands and wrapped them around the left side of this Barbie doll. This is because I have nerve pain, which is a chronic condition that many people deal with these days. The nerve pain also manifests as a burning sensation. And so the left side of my body feels like it's constantly on fire. So some of you may have Facebook, and Facebook will show you memories of your life. And sometimes they make me very sad, but I like this quote by Theodore Roosevelt, that comparison is the thief of joy. So you saw that I'm an expressive person, and I'm making a documentary film about my story. Not finished yet, but it'll be coming out soon. And this is a little video. So the name of my film is The Great Now What? I've had a stroke and now I'm chronically ill. So now what? And one of the pictures I showed you at the beginning of this talk was of me being bold. You could say I'm still bold. It's a pretty bold thing to tell a bunch of strangers the most gruesome details of the worst moment of your life in the hopes that it will build some empathy and compassion. Also, I'm on stage again with Family Theater Company, which only casts actors with disabilities. And I'm outdoors, again, enjoying Colorado on a recumbent tricycle. So how can we create a more inclusive, compassionate society for everyone, and especially those with chronic illnesses? I would say that one thing that was very hurtful at the beginning of my illness was how separate I felt from the rest of society. But the fact is, we're not separate. We're all mixed in with each other all the time. These are screenshots from the Centers for Disease Control website, the CDC. 6 in 10 adults in the US have a chronic disease. 4 in 10 adults have 2 or more. And 50 million adults have chronic pain daily or almost daily. So when we think about building a more empathetic society, I love what Brené Brown has to say about empathy. She is a brilliant public speaker. She has a master's in social work, and this is from one of her speeches.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
And I firmly believe that what makes something better is human connection. So many of us live with chronic illnesses and chronic pain, disabilities. How can we better talk to each other? So, one thing to not say to someone who has disclosed that they have a chronic illness, the phrase, you don't look sick. Don't judge a book by its cover. I love this piece of art by Elise Brurion. You have these two forms, and one is the human form that you see on the outside, and that person is smiling and focused. They're not visibly in pain. They don't have any mobility problems that you can see. Versus the second form, which is what I feel as the chronically ill person. All kinds of things can be going on. Migraines, brain fog, nausea, fatigue, stiffness, all kinds of pain. There's a whole world of stuff that can be going on inside a person that is not apparent on the outside. For instance, I have 27 medical diagnoses as a result of my stroke, and only a handful of them are apparent from the outside. Here is a very incomplete list of invisible illnesses: arthritis, cancer, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is more commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depression and mental illness, diabetes, stroke, long COVID, which many millions of Americans will be living with as a result of this pandemic, digestive disorders like celiac, colitis, and irritable bowel syndrome, migraine and headaches, heart conditions, lupus, chronic Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, brain injury, neuropathy, and cavernous angioma, which again is the malformation that I had in my brain. So what you could say, instead of you don't look sick, don't be skeptical of this person who has disclosed this to you. Just believe them. Believe your friend or coworker or family member is telling you the truth about their situation. Another thing not to say, that must be getting better, right? We all want to be perfectly healthy, but the fact is that we can't. It's not realistic. Like I'm not going to get 100% better from my stroke. I have a chronic condition now, and that is ongoing. So instead of focusing on quote unquote getting better, I need to figure out how to manage my life. And a good way to explain what it's like to manage your life when you're chronically ill is spoon theory. And this theory was developed by Christine Miserando. She has lupus, and she's trying to explain to people how it is to go through her days. So when you have a chronic illness, everything is finite. Your energy is only a certain amount. Your ability to focus and concentrate is only a certain amount. And everything costs you spoons. So getting out of bed is going to cost you some spoons. Taking a shower, preparing and eating a meal, doing housework, and it's going to cost you a lot of spoons to go to work, go to school, exercise. So I would encourage you to think about all the things you have to do in your day. And how would you get through your day if you only had 12 spoons to spend? And if you have slept poorly the night before, then maybe you only have 9 spoons to spend on your day. So as a result of having limited spoons, you might need to cancel. So if someone with a chronic illness cancels on you, just say, that's fine, we'll get to better together next time. And please keep inviting us. I know it can get frustrating if people cancel, but we want to come. We really want to come to events, but sometimes our bodies won't let us. Another thing not to say, just stay positive. This can feel very dismissive. I really love the TED Talk by a woman named Susan David. She has a brilliant speech about the gift and power of emotional courage. And she talks about emotional agility and that it can be very rigid to prescribe to someone that they need to be positive all the time, because that is not realistic of what it's like to live a human life that has a full range of experiences. It's not realistic that someone is not going to feel anger or resentment or grief or regret in the course of their illness. And to tell them just stay positive, it can feel very unkind. I love this quote by her, that discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. So what you could say, instead of just stay positive, you could say something affirmative. I know you're trying hard. I'm proud of you. I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you. Another thing not to say, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Please don't put the responsibility on me, the chronically ill person. I do need help to get through my life. And it's great to offer help, but if you're going to offer help, I would say offer something specific, something that you could realistically do. For instance, could I walk your dog tomorrow morning? Could I bring you dinner on Thursday? Could I come empty your dishwasher and take out your trash this weekend? Could I order you something online and have it shipped to you? Things like that, because I have so much to manage and I have only a limited number of spoons and a limited amount of energy to manage my life. So saying, let me know if I can help you is another thing that I have to manage. So I'd love to talk a bit about Family Theater Company, which is an inclusive, disability affirmative community organization for performers with disabilities and chronic illnesses in Denver. I'm such a huge fan of this organization. and this is a bit about them.
It can seem so simplistic, I think, sometimes, that like, oh, you know, we're getting somebody with a cane on stage, you know, somebody who survived a stroke, and we're putting them on stage. Boom, you know, what's hard about that? But I think what's going on below the surface or behind the scenes is so much deeper in terms of the personal transformation that people are getting by feeling significant again in the world.
It sounds a little corny, but family is a family, and that's what I love about it. We are there for each other. Art definitely heals pain, because I was in a show up until the day before my surgery to fix my spine. It was excruciatingly painful. I would go off stage and vomit and then come back on stage and do my thing. I was able to do the art, even though my body was completely shut down. I get so involved in the moment, and there's nothing more. In Into the Woods, there's this scene where we walk on and we're glaring at Cinderella. And I'm looking at her and she's looking at me, and I've completely forgotten that I can't feel my right leg. I've completely forgotten that the lady to my left is blind and that the woman in front of me has another spinal cord injury. It's just Cinderella and the stepsisters in this moment. All of those little moments get tied together in this art form to heal all of these little things that all of us have for just the moment, just to give us that moment of just truly being alive.
What's most important is making sure that this actor is supported and loved and can feel significant and do the work that they need to do.
Whereas in professional theater, if you're having muscle spasms, shut up and do your job.
Our audience is taking that away, of like seeing people that normally they don't see out in the world. They don't see highlighted. They don't see given that space and that time and that focus and that attention. And all of a sudden, that's what we're doing. We're putting the spotlight on those individuals and saying, you now get to share yourself.
So family has been an extraordinary organization for me to be a part of. I feel like once I became chronically ill, I encountered so much judgment and exclusion in mainstream society, but family is the opposite of that. It's a beautiful, validating, gratifying organization to be a part of, and it's deeply empowering to people with disabilities. I would encourage you to check out Family's YouTube page, and I think Carol will post a link in the chat. They have a great series about how to be a good blank to a person with a disability. And they're awesome little 2-minute videos, and they highlight the company and best practices. And they feature all actors from Family Theater Company. So how can we create an inclusive community and be a little bit more like Family Theater? I would say number one thing is to be welcoming, be flexible and understanding to people with chronic illnesses. Check in with your community members about their physical, emotional, and financial needs, and check in without judgment. And as a side note, I would love to point out that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is double that of people without disabilities. So if you have community members who are chronically ill or disabled, they're probably under more financial stress than the average person. Allow people to participate from home. Tonight is a perfect example of a great way that we can all gather tonight on this night when there's a big winter storm coming into Denver, but we don't have to deal with transportation questions. We can all gather in the digital space, and there's, you know, we can all be here regardless of how we may be feeling in terms of our bodies. So it's a great way to gather. I think that COVID has revealed numerous things about community and participation. And it's been, super difficult to go through this pandemic. But I believe that it is teaching us valuable things. And one thing that I felt as a person with a chronic illness who is at home quite a lot anyway, is that especially in the beginning of COVID, during lockdown in March, April, May of 2020, when everyone else felt like their lives were closing down and closing in, I felt like my life was opening up in a way, because suddenly there were events that I could go to and gatherings that I could go to virtually that I didn't have access to before. If you're going to have events in person, make sure they're accessible to people with chronic illness and chronic pain. Ask yourself, are there stairs? If there are stairs, are there handrails on the stairs? Is there an elevator or a ramp so someone using a wheelchair can access the space? Is there ergonomic seating if that is applicable? And if you have an organization with a DEI statement, I would very much encourage you to add the A at the end. So you have diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Lastly, I would say if community members need to bring something with them to help them show up and be present, don't judge them for that thing that they may have. For instance, my father had terrible back pain and he would bring this wooden board with him everywhere. So he had it in his car, he would bring it to community meetings, to the restaurant sometimes. And it helped him show up in an authentic way and be present. But it's certainly not what everyone else needs. Another example might be a special pillow that you need to sit on for your back or hip pain, or maybe you need a fidget spinner with you. All these things are allowing people to show up and be present in community spaces. So don't judge them or mock them for these things. I'd like to finish up today with the signs of stroke. The acronym is B FAST, balance, eyes, face, arms, speech, time to call 911. 80% of strokes are preventable, so I hope you will recognize the signs of stroke. Thank you so much to Jewish Disabilities Advocates. Thank you to Jewish Family Service of Colorado. Thank you to Carol and Erica for setting this up today. Thank you to Topher, our ASL interpreter, and thank all of you for coming today. And now we'll have some time for Q&A.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maggie, for what a wonderful presentation. I know we all learned a lot from you, and we really do want to open it up to question and answer. So if you have questions, feel free to share them in the chat, or you can use the reaction feature at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way and raise your hand like that, we will really try to call on everyone that we can see. So Bonnie, can I start with you? And unmute yourself, yeah.
Thank you, Maggie. That was an awesome presentation. My question to you is, can you share any examples of how people or organizations have made you feel supported, welcomed, or included as you join their space, whether in person or virtually?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would say one thing about virtual spaces is that there's incredible access, and I very much hope that this is not a temporary thing, that we can sustain virtual spaces as an option. throughout COVID and beyond, because it's allowed people with disabilities and chronic illnesses to participate in ways, work from home, go to school from home, and there's just so many more possibilities for us. So I very much hope that this is not just for now in terms of virtual spaces and access. And then in terms of in-person spaces, I think it's very helpful to let people know if the space is wheelchair accessible. Because if I get an invitation to go somewhere, then I don't know if it's wheelchair accessible or not, then I need to Google it and figure it out. And and so if it just said that from the beginning, that would be very helpful. And then in terms of when you get there, when you show up in person, just be welcoming to people and don't treat them differently than you would treat anyone else. Greet them, look them in the eye, and be welcoming and friendly. I feel like one thing that happened to me that I noticed was extremely different from, pre-stroke life to post-stroke life, is that people would not make eye contact with me. And it's very hurtful to avoid people and pretend like they don't exist. And maybe there's something about your comfort or discomfort with that person, but look at that person like they're a real person in front of you, because they are, and avoiding them can be very painful.
Thank you, Maggie. Debbie, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. So Maggie, you mentioned that you have many chronic conditions as a result of the stroke. And my question has to do with doctors. Has it been challenging for you to find doctors who understand and accept all of the various different things that you talk about when you talk about your body?
Well, I would say that my experience with doctors has been pretty good, because it's easy to tell what happened to me and why, right? It's right there on an MRI scan that I had a brain hemorrhage. Versus if I were someone with long COVID or chronic Lyme disease, or a disease that is not very well understood and does not show up readily on scans, it's not easy to measure something like brain fog or fatigue. And so I have spoken with a lot of people who are chronically ill who feel very dismissed by the medical community, because they feel like these doctors just don't believe it's real what's happening to them, because it's very hard to tell, it's very hard to diagnose. And some people will go for years having issues and not having a diagnosis, and they'll have to go through doctor after doctor after doctor until they can find someone who will take the time and believe them and work on figuring it out, because it may be not the first answer that you could come across as a doctor, but if you take the time and if you believe people, then hopefully you can figure it out. But I know that has been a big challenge for many people with chronic illnesses.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are two questions in the chat that are kind of different sides of the same coin. One is, if a person who is chronically ill, how can they learn to accept help? And another person asked in a similar way, they want to be able to ask for help, but they don't want to burden family and friends. So do you have any thoughts on that, Maggie?
I would say that I had this exact same problem. And I thought of myself as this very independent person, and it's like a matter of pride that I don't need to ask for help, right? I can help other people, but I'm never gonna ask for help. And so I wouldn't for a long time. But it gets to a point where you have to. And Brene Brown, I love her. I've read all of her books. And she has a great thing to say about help and asking for help, that if you can't accept help without judgment, then you're never really offering help without judgment. And so to be able to give, be able to accept, to have the vulnerability to say, I need help with XYZ is not nothing, but I would encourage people to be more open and ask for what you need. Show up authentically and tell the truth about your situation.
And similar to that, another question was, do you have any advice for someone who was recently diagnosed with a chronic health condition?
Well, I would say the number one thing I would encourage people to do is be kind to yourself, because I cannot tell you how mean I was and critical and disparaging to myself in my own mind, especially at the beginning of my stroke recovery. Very hard on myself, told myself I wasn't working hard enough, and if I didn't recover, then it's because I'm lazy or I'm not trying hard enough. And it's cruel to speak to yourself that way. And so you should speak to yourself as though you were talking to a good friend, right? You would never say those awful things to a good friend of yours. So you shouldn't say them to yourself. Just be kind to yourself inside your own.
Thank you. Judy, I see you have your hand up.
Sorry, I had to get to the unmute. So I have a question which relates very much to the questions you've already answered. I'm represent the inclusion committee at one of the organizations at Boneh Shalom, and we're going back to the same issue of people being able to share the issues that they are dealing with. I think that we've learned that many people who have invisible illnesses, they don't want to share them. They don't want to, they don't feel comfortable sharing them. They feel like they have to mask them. So what can organizations do to change the culture so that people feel comfortable sharing whatever their invisible pain or chronic illnesses are? What can we do to help?
Yes, and I would say in this culture that values productivity and efficiency, it's hard to not be that and to show up authentically and say, I'm not doing 100% perfectly today. But if you have an organization where you allow people to have a check-in and encourage them to be honest about where they're at. For instance, Family Theater has a check-in at the beginning of every rehearsal where everyone can say something if they need to be like, hey, I really slept poorly last night and I'm super, super tired. Or, hey, I had a terrible day at work and I'm super stressed out. And it's there without judgment, this access, this check-in space at the beginning of rehearsal. Like, it's like, just talk about where you're at and it's fine, no judgment. So I would say if you have an organization, you could say, this is the space where we hope that people will be authentic and honest about where they're at and not feel pressure to perform happiness or pretend like everything is going okay. I feel like COVID, especially, everything is not going okay. It's really difficult. And I think we're all being a little more honest with each other, which I appreciate, because some of the artifice is gone because we're all struggling right now.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I wanted to share too that I was in a meeting earlier this year with Rabbi Bobby Rosenberg, who has many chronic health conditions. And he said he had made a commitment. So we started the meeting and everyone said, how are you doing? And he said, today I'm really tired. He's dealing with a lot. And he said, I made a commitment that in 2022, I've honored my own self to answer the question honestly. And I hope that that encourages other people to do so as well. And when we do that, we learn that we're all challenged, especially right now. And the more we can open up to each other, like you talked about connection, the more we can do that, the more we can support each other. So I thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Cindy, I see your hand raised.
Maggie, first I wanted to sort of just say thank you, because not just for being so brave and vulnerable for sharing your story, but for giving a lot of people a voice. I was thinking about something you said earlier about accepting help, offering help, and not making it your problem, not making it your responsibility to ask. What would you say to people who want to help, but don't know what to offer, or sometimes don't want to insult? Like, I want to offer you help, but I also don't want to insult you or make you feel bad with what I might offer as help. And so I did. I listened to everything you said and I learned a lot, but I struggle with that a lot in wanting to offer help, even to my own children, and not always knowing what to offer. But you're right, you shouldn't necessarily have to ask. So what would you recommend to someone like me so that I don't insult you, but I also don't make it your responsibility?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the phrase, I would say sometimes it's just a question or a matter of language, right? So if you say, if there's anything I can do, let me know, then it's on me, right? But if you say, you're important to me and I want to help you, can you tell me how I could help you in a meaningful way? Then I feel like, then it's not so much of a kind of a throwaway comment.
Or an empty promise, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the good question. And I want to acknowledge that it's 8 o'clock. I know we're coming to the end of our hour and I want to honor everyone's time. Maggie has graciously agreed to stay on a bit longer to answer any remaining questions, but I know some folks have to sign off. Again, we are really grateful that you gave us your time this evening. We appreciate this wonderful discussion and hope to see many of you at the upcoming JDAIM programs in our community. We're sharing that link again now in the chat. And for those of you who are leaving, be well and good night. For those of you who want to stay, please join us, and Maggie will stay for a few more minutes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Maggie, one more question that was in the chat was about family. And the question was whether any of the family productions are accessible virtually.
So in terms of this year, I'm not sure what they're going to do, but they did offer virtual options last year. And they typically do a web series, usually once a year or every other year. So any of those are on their website, and also if you check their website, you can find out which web series may be coming up soon. I don't exactly know what they'll be doing with their spring performance, which is a musical called The Spitfire Grill, which opens in mid-March. But if you go to their website, I'm sure it will say if there are virtual options or not. For instance, last summer, we did Alice in Wonderland, and that was available in person as well as virtually.
Thanks, Maggie. Any other questions? There's a lot of compliments in the chat, Maggie. Everyone is really appreciative of all the work that you put in and just your incredible ability to convey so many important messages to us.
And I think I saw it, but yeah, the family website is in the chat too. So you should be able to find out about all the glorious things they're doing with that company if you go there.
Yes, family is fabulous. For those of you who haven't had a chance to see a production, it's well worth it. Okay, sorry, Bonnie, I see you have your hand up again, or did you just not take it down before? Okay, great. Well, thank you all again for being here tonight. Thank you so much, Maggie. We really appreciate it. I hope several of you will join the upcoming JDAIM programs throughout the community. All our JDA partners have put in so much work. The Jewish Disabilities Advocates organizations that are involved have really done a tremendous amount of work to create some wonderful programming throughout the month of February. So please do check out that link. And again, if you have any questions about Jewish Disabilities Advocates, please feel free to contact myself or Carol.